I'm Elliot Chodoff, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered, your go-to podcast for in-depth analysis on the complex and dynamic conflicts shaping the Middle East, Israel, and the world. Join us as we delve into the latest developments, historical contexts, and the geopolitical forces at play. We bring you the insights you need to understand the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay engaged, and uncover the truths behind the headlines. Hi, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered. I'm Elliot Chodoff. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Zev Uslan, from the far west of the United States. We're in such different time zones that I say good morning to him and he says good evening to me. Here in Israel, it's a little after 7 p.m. on July 12th. And all sorts of stuff going on just as we began recording. News is coming out of the Straits of Hormuz and Iran. But before that, Don, how's the jet lag? Zev, how's the jet lag?
Yeah, I completely renounced the name Don, even here. So jet lag's recovered. Usually you said, how are things in Jerusalem? I'm not in Jerusalem. I'm 9,000 miles away, north of Seattle, Washington, in beautiful Edmonds, Washington, surrounded by 3 national parks, beautiful waterways that are free of any missiles, and mountains and viewpoints and peacefulness and quiet and cuteness, and the contrast between what we're going to be talking about and being here is so dramatic that I think it speaks to the disparity between the experience of living in Israel and living outside of Israel and trying to understand the experience of being in Israel as a people, but also the political military context is actually beyond comprehension sitting here. I have visited with a number of Jewish friends and non-Jewish friends, all of whom are thoughtful, compassionate, very interested people. And they ask questions that you and I are discussing without resolution. But we, I think, have learned to accept ambiguity, and they can't. They want clarity. They want understanding. They want completeness. And so I'm hoping that our continued podcasts and conversations can enlighten our fellow decent people who are trying to understand, at least in the overview of what's going on in general, let alone just before we went on the air, you and I talked about the stuff that's happening right now. So it's up to you, Major. What's going on?
If I knew what was going on, I'd be a general. So just a little bit of background, news-wise, for the past few days, the Iranians, about 3 or 4 days ago, began firing at ships that were transiting the Straits of Hormuz on the Omani side, as opposed to the Iranian side. There are 2 channels in the Straits. There's a channel that's closer to Iran and a channel that's closer to Oman. And the Iranians are declaring control over both of them, which is in complete violation of the memorandum of understanding. And as a result, they fired on a number of ships. The United States responded the first night with hitting something like 80 targets, and then 90 targets, and then last night 160 targets. And the most recent news is they announced that they fired on more ships, including American warships, and there are explosions being heard in Bandar Abbas, which is their port city on the Straits. That's the quick news. By the time anybody hears this podcast, there will be more news. And with that and all the difficulties of trying to real-time analyze what's going on, let me try to break down what I think is happening And where it looks like it might be going, of course, with the caveat that this all may be wrong by the time the podcast is over, let alone by the time it's broadcast. So first of all, not surprisingly, and I've said this numerous times, and I have a piece on social media, which I wrote a few months ago, entitled "Dear Donald, Welcome to Ayatollah's Flying Carpet Market. Thank you for negotiating." One of the rules of the flying carpet market is that agreements don't end the discussion, they begin them. And this is very, very different from the American idea that, okay, we have an agreement, we shake hands, we sign, and that's it, the issue is closed. Here, you have an agreement, and that's just the opening salvo of the continuing conflict and negotiations. So that's number one. And the Iranians have been repeatedly violating principles of the very vague memorandum of understanding, including maintaining a status quo on their nuclear program. And it's clear that they're not. They're clearing out and they're doing work. How much and how. Here, the content is less important than the structure. In other words, they are establishing a status quo that says we don't have to keep the agreement, and we're letting you know up front that we don't have to keep the agreement, and we're not going to. So that's background. And with that, the shooting in the Straits, the Americans, President Trump said that the status quo in the Straits was going to be maintained during the 60 days of the post-memorandum negotiations. It didn't last 60 minutes, let alone 60 days, and here we are. So the first question is, what is Iran trying to do? The next question is, what is America trying to do? And how does this all play out, including with Israel? So the first thing that Iran is trying to do is establish a new status quo that is different from the status quo of the memorandum, of the MOU. Okay, every time you establish a new status quo, it becomes the status quo. And then when they come back and say, but we agreed on maintaining a status quo, they come back and say, yeah, this is the status quo. Now, that was then, this is now. Status quo is current. And tomorrow we'll change it again. It'll become current again. It's almost a who's on first kind of word game. Tomorrow will be today, and today will be yesterday. And when it's today, tomorrow will be tomorrow. But then when it becomes tomorrow, it'll become today. And I think you can see this can go ad infinitum of who's on first. Which day establishes the status quo? Status quo is today, but you changed it yesterday, but that was yesterday, etc. I don't want to over belabor the point, but I think it's very important, and I emphasize it because we have this kind of sense of time being frozen. You sign a contract, and that enshrines time in the contract. Here, it doesn't work. That's number one. Yes.
Just briefly, I realize it's another podcast tapping into your sociologist part of you. How much is stereotypical Middle Eastern negotiating tactics, and how much is that with Iran on steroids? More so, just for context.
Okay, so it's both, and I'll come to the second part of that in a moment. But I think it's important for us to understand that world values are not the same as Western Judeo-Christian values, and things that in the West we take for granted, such as my word is my bond, such as my signature has moral, ethical, as well as legal value, is not the same everywhere in the world. And this isn't about, and I think is a very important point to make. This isn't about being trustworthy or not trustworthy. This is about having a different set of values that, if you look at it from our ethnocentric perspective, Our values are the best because they're ours. They have to be. I'm saying that not as a measurement, simply ethnocentric, and we're all ethnocentric. My world is my world, and my world is the best world for me because it's the world that I live in. And they live in a different world of values, which works for them. Just as East Asia has different values that works for them. And there are tribal values all around the world that are different, and that works for them. And the problem, of course, comes in the cross cultural assumptions of values. Here, let me try to give an analogy that I've used for many years. A Westerner and a Middle Easterner meet, and they're adversaries, but they meet up, and they meet up on the street, and they shake hands, and the Middle Easterner invites the Westerner to his home for dinner and overnight. And the Westerner goes to the Middle Easterner's home and sits down to dinner. And he's not fully aware of cultural value contrasts. He's terrified. Why is he terrified? Because in classical European values, I'm not talking about modernity, I'm talking about go back a couple of 100 years, 300 years, it was perfectly legitimate to poison your guest at the dinner table. It was done. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of dispute on this, and I think the dispute is nonsense. Much of the ritual of opening a bottle of wine with guests has to do with the fact that poison can very easily be hidden in a red wine. And it includes things like the bottle is opened in front of the guests. Once it's opened, it never leaves the table. The host sniffs the cork and tastes the wine. Now, to make sure it's not sour, really? Does he taste the sour cream? Does he taste the milk? What's the worst that could possibly happen if the wine has gone bad? Everybody have a sip of vinegar, pour it out, and get another bottle. But not if you put cyanide into it. And the host shows by opening it, sniffing it, tasting it, that the bottle is clean, unpolluted, unpoisoned. And then once he does that, everybody else is poured. And as I said, if the bottle is not finished, it stays at the table. It never disappears from the table. So this poor guy is sitting at this Middle Easterner's table, and he's terrified, except that he doesn't realize that there's no chance in the world that anything will happen to him at this guy's table, because his host is honor bound by his values, not only not to harm his guest, but to protect his guest. He has a lovely dinner, had a lovely evening, spends the night, gets up in the morning, has a lovely breakfast. He's feeling great. He goes to the door, he shakes hands with the host, he turns around to leave, and the host stabs him in the back. European culture? Oh my God, stab in the back. How much that treachery. Western culture. Middle Eastern culture, stab in the back is what you do. Which threat value, protection value is better? Neither. But if you expect your value system to be used when you're engaged in another value system, you are in a great deal of danger. By the way, his Middle Eastern friend visiting him in Europe will die at the dinner table, but he would never be stabbed in the back.
You may
Yes.
recall that 10, 11 years ago, a friend and I came from Seattle and took a tour of Jordan, private tour. And when we crossed the
Yes.
border, after they're checking for our Jewish items, the um, tour guide, first thing he said was, "You're safe while you're in my presence. I'm responsible for you." And that scared me. I mean, I had heard some of this stuff before, but he made such a momentous event out of it. Like, don't
Yes.
worry, you're safe when you're with me. And I'm going, will you go to the bathroom with me too, please? So yeah, it speaks to that.
So again, what we're seeing here are two different cultures of two different value systems that relate to negotiations and agreements and conflict in two different ways. That's first of all. The Iranians are trying to push as far as they can to gain as much as they can. And the Americans, let's flip to the other side. I was asked this in an interview a couple of days ago, is America using a deterrence strategy? And my answer is no. Deterrence is gone here. What America is using is a strategy of what is called coercive diplomacy. America's trying to coerce the Iranians into a certain type of behavior, not just to cease and desist, but to behave a certain way. Now, the use of force in coercive diplomacy is it's built in, but it's, as all use of force, it's problematic. Because first of all, it means that your diplomacy has failed. Okay, and this is an important point also in deterrence strategy. If you are retaliating, it is because your diplomatic strategy has failed. In other words, they have violated the terms of your condition. The German great German strategist Karl von Clausewitz, in his book on war, which is unreadable in every language, uh, famously wrote, "War is an extension of policy by additional means." And by the way, that's the correct translation, not by other means, but by additional means. What it means, though, and this is Elliot's commentary on Clausewitz, I've been teaching him for over 3 decades. What Clausewitz means is that war is what happens when your diplomatic political policy has reached a dead end. It's failed in one way or another, and you must go to violence in order to promote it in whatever shape and form. And he, like Sun Tzu, the Chinese strategist of 2,500 years ago, basically, and Sun Tzu says it very clearly, the best victory is the victory in the battle that you don't have to fight. Okay, so they're both essentially saying the same thing in different ways. The fact that the Americans are bombing Iranian targets means that coercive diplomacy has not worked and is not working. Now, does that guarantee that it will fail? No, but it doesn't look good. Let's put it that way. Because the Iranians are willing to accept the punishment that the Americans are inflicting upon them. And now that brings us to the next sort of level of this discussion. You asked about culture and leadership, and I said I'll deal with the culture, and now let's deal with the leadership. One of the consequences of the decapitation operation in the beginning of the fighting that started at the end of February is that the people running Iran today are much more hard line than the people who were running it before. Now, there are a number of reasons for that. I say hard line, not more fanatic or less. They're all hardcore Khomeiniist, Islamist, export revolution, jihadi radicals. I think that covers everything. However, these guys, for two reasons, are more willing to go out there and push the envelope, and I'll add to that, take risks. One reason is because they are the people who rose to the top are the hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool Khomeiniist Islamists. The ones who were taken out included those, but they included others as well, other types of fanatics. Let's not, again, this is not about moderate versus extremist. It's about style. But the second thing we need to keep in mind as well is that these guys are all newbies. They have no experience in the level that they're operating right now. The people who were taken out, including Ali Khamenei, the Ayatollah, had been Ayatollah, had been supreme leader for decades. He actually inherited the position from Khomeini. So he had years of experience. His advisors had years of experience. His upper echelon elitists had years of experience. And now these new guys are coming in and they don't have that experience. And they're much less adept at treading that fine line between pushing the envelope and tearing it. So we're in that place that makes it very difficult to, virtually impossible to predict even a day in advance. Do they believe that they have sufficient power, religious belief, and misunderstanding of American behavior, which is easy enough to misunderstand, where they will push beyond? Because let's be serious, if they put a missile into an American aircraft carrier, this coercive diplomacy business ends immediately. This goes to full-scale war. And I'm not sure they understand that. Now, part of that is the Trump administration and President Trump himself, and J.D. Vance, and all sorts of mixed messages. And I mean, Trump can give 7 mixed messages in one speech, going back and forth, and then throw in Rubio and Vance and Hegseth and a few others. And I say this analytically, not critically, because I don't know that it's necessarily a bad strategy. It's not my strategy, but I don't know it's necessarily a bad one. But the result is that when you're sitting on the other side in Tehran, you say, I'm going to pick the line that suits me and operate on that and discount all the rest of it. If you add to that the inherent image weakness that democracies have, and I'm going to emphasize image weakness, that democracies have when facing any totalitarian system. And this goes back to the Nazis, to the Imperial Japanese, to all of them. The idea that rights, freedoms are what we understand the strength of Western society and of American society, they see as weakness. How the heck can you run a country, think Vietnam, period, with mass demonstrations and riots and not kill 40,000 people? Okay, so you say, all right, there was Kent State and Jackson State, but those were aberrations. Tragic, but those were aberrations. You didn't have the army coming out and massacring thousands and thousands of people in the Mall of Washington, D.C. during the huge anti-war demonstration. They, and correctly so, just to be, in case anybody is not understanding my point here, correctly so, that's what gives a country like the United States its ultimate depth of power. When you're sitting in Tehran, you look at that and say, how the heck can you run a country that way? You have that many people out there demonstrating. How do you know they're not going to be storming the Capitol and the White House? Machine gun them. That's what we would do. Actually, that's what we did do. And that gives an impression to them of Western weakness and the belief that we can push them and win. And again, this isn't uniquely jihadi. The Japanese strategy of Pearl Harbor and beyond was that America didn't have the will to fight for more than a year to 2 years. And they would simply quit because America was a soft democracy and it didn't have the Bushido power of Imperial Japan. And Hitler still thought many of the same things, which is why he declared war on the United States as well. So I think that's a grand mix of what we're seeing. Now, what's interesting is that the Iranians are retaliating against Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, but not Israel. And this, in my opinion, supports the point that they're trying to play a diplomatic game here, not a military game. They think they can manage the United States and its responses. And so far they're doing it. Now, whether they continue to or not remains to be seen. That is a limb I'm not going to go out on. But I think they know that if they launched missiles at Israel, the Israeli response would be quick and massive. Because one of the things that we learned in the course of the last couple of years of doing things in step with the Americans is that Trump can say yes, but no, almost in the same breath. And under those circumstances, you don't respond with a lukewarm strike thinking that tomorrow we're going to hit them harder, because he may not give you the tomorrow. So my guess, and it's an educated guess, is that they know that we know that we know that they know that we know that they know that if they launch missiles, our response is going to be massive, with everything we are capable of throwing at them in the first round. And they don't have a lot left. Let's be serious. They're rebuilding, also in part in violation of the MOU. They're redesigning and recovering, but they're nowhere near where they were. And a massive strike on our part can set them back once again even further. So they're scrupulously trying to keep Israel out, up until this point anyway. I wouldn't put it past them to use Hezbollah at some point and go with plausible deniability. It wasn't us. As a matter of fact, even yesterday, one of the Iranian leaders said, the shooting at the ships was not, the order didn't come from Tehran. It was a local rebellious IRGC guy who did it. Yeah, right. There's very loose control in Iran. And if you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn, put it up for sale. But they're trying. They're trying. Yes.
I kind of understand why they're going after other Arab states, Shiite, Sunni, but wasn't Qatar a supporter of much of the activity of Hamas? I'm a little confused by why they would go after Qatar.
Welcome to the Middle East. The cross identities in the Middle East are worthy of not a course of study, but a degree of study in and of itself. In other words, there is religion, there's sub-religion. Okay, Sunni Shiite. By the way, even within the Sunnis and Shiites, there are subgroups. Okay, the Qataris are Wahhabis, the Omanis are not. The Saudis are sort of. The Egyptians are not, except for the Muslim Brotherhood, which are not, but they're kind of. That's just within Sunnism. You have Shiites who are Khomeinists. You have Shiites who are anti-Khomeinists. They're all Muslims. Then you have Christians. You have different types of Christians. You have Druze. The Druze are relatively monolithic. You have other sects, the Alawites, and then you have Kurds, and so on. You then have the Arab, non-Arab divide. The Iranians are not Arabs, they're Persians. The Turks are not Arabs, they're Turks. The Kurds are not Arabs. But the Omanis, Qataris, Kuwaitis, Jordanians, Lebanese, Egyptians, Libyans, Tunisians, Moroccans are Arabs. I left out a few.
This is funnier than the Jewish jokes, 2 Jews or 3 synagogues.
That's right.
That's the biggest problem we have,
Okay. Okay, so I want to conclude with this point, having made that sort of mixed salad of identities. Who you identify with at the moment is in part my enemy's enemy is my friend. And it's not just a theory, because in a region that is extremely unstable and betting on the wrong horse can get you killed, you go with wherever you have an affinity. And I'll give you a Lebanese example of it very briefly to give you just as an illustration. Before Khomeini came to power, there was already a Shiite Lebanese militia called Amal. It still exists. Shiite Lebanese militia called Amal. When Khomeini came to power, Amal did not subscribe to Khomeinism. Still doesn't, by the way. So in order to have a Shiite foothold in Lebanon, the Iranians created Hezbollah, which is a Khomeiniist Shiite organization. So now you have 2 fighting groups in Lebanon, 2 Shiite groups, Amal and Hezbollah. When there's been internal Shiite conflict, they have fought each other. But when the Shiites have been pressured from the outside, let's say by the Christians, they've been together against the Christians. When the Syrians came in, the Syrians were supporting Iran. Hezbollah became part of the Syrian constellation. Amal fought against them. Now, remember, this is all going to be on the test, and it's going to be written answer, not multiple choice. My point here, the lesson from all of this is that the sands are constantly shifting, and people, groups, back whoever will give them the immediate advantage, and identity is part of that. So it's Arabs versus Persians, except when it's not. It's Shiites versus Sunnis, except when it's not. It's Khomeinists versus non-Khomeinists, except when it's not. It's Wahhabis against modernists, except when it's not. And that's why it's very, very difficult to create working models to anticipate and predict political and violent behavior in this region. But as Tom Lehrer famously wrote, and everybody hates the Jews.
Again, thank you, Elliot. Sitting in America as an Israeli American Jew, recovering liberal, still liberal, I can understand why Westerners are good, well-intended, terribly confused by this, because our model and all the things you mentioned, but it's also dramatically more simplistic. It's dramatically more
Yes.
simplistic. It's baseball, football models of sports: win, lose, good, bad,
Right.
next. And it is not comprehensible, actually. I mean, it's really not. It takes you, for whom this is your career and your passion. The rest of us go, blah, 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 blah. I
I do too
appreciate,
sometimes. It's okay.
yeah. No, I appreciate A, the need for simplicity, B, why some people hang on to black, white simplicity, stupidity. But even thoughtful, kind, reasonable people who want to understand must go, I don't get it. And it is easier here to blame Trump, separate, no political statement, simply because, he is the confusion we have. That's the confusion we don't understand. And it's far more confusing than Trumpism, as confusing as that is. Anyway, thank you, Elliot. And I look forward to our next podcast and
Carry this further.
and all the dramatic
We'll see
changes that
where
will
we are
happen
in
in
a
the
few
next 10
days.
minutes. Right.
That's
Thank you,
right.
Elliot.
Good. Well, again, always a pleasure. And to our listeners, thanks for being with us. Thanks for listening in. If you've enjoyed, pass it around, spread it around as widely as possible. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay engaged. Thank you for listening to Conflict Uncovered. As always, it's been another rough day in the Middle East. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share and recommend with your friends, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. For more in-depth analysis and exclusive content, join our community and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the critical issues shaping the Middle East and the world. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.